When we are working for the installation of HVAC ducting work, for joining the two duct pieces together, sometimes we are using slip and dry methods, sometimes we use slip on flange or duct mate, and sometimes we are using steel angle flanges for joining the two duct. Now we will study the application of different types of duct joint and their selection criteria. I, Engineer Nasir, welcome you to our channel NC Engineering and Technology. Friends, if you are new to our channel or still you have not subscribed it, please subscribe to our channel so that we can make more studies and bring more videos for you. Before study of their selection and application, let us have some idea about these duct joint types. The first one is slip and dry method. Normally it is used for the low cost project where we are fabricating the duct at site. A rectangular duct has 4 sides. You can see in this picture 1, 2, 3, 4. The shorter side are joined by dry slip and the longer side are joined by S slip. In this picture you can see these are dry slip and S slip are of two types, one plain and another standing. You can see in this picture the end of the shorter side of the duct is bent to be used for the connection with the help of dry slip. You can see in this section this is the bended end of one duct and this is another bended end of another duct, and the dry slip is inserted into bended end to connect the duct together. The S slip is like S in shape and the duct end is kept plain to be connected with the help of S slip. You can see this is the section of S slip. The plain end of one duct is inserted in this portion and the plain end of another duct is inserted in this portion, and the joint will be like this. You can see in this picture. When the two plain end of the longer side of the duct is connected with the help of S slip, the bended end of the shorter side of the duct came together. You can see in this picture, and we insert the dry slip like this black to connect these two bended ends. When we are using the dry and slip method for joining the duct, there are some rules we need to follow. For T1 type dry slip, we need to follow these rules. Number 1, gauge no less than 2 gauges than duct gauge. If our duct gauge is 22 gauge, then we need to fabricate the dry slip of minimum 24 gauge. Number 2, the dry slip we should fabricate minimum 24 gauge. We cannot fabricate the dry slip lesser gauge than 24. Number 3, we can use dry slip 8 any length in 2-inch water gauge pressure. If we are fabricating our duct with a external static pressure of 2-inch water gauge, then we can use dry slip 8 any length. Number 4, if we are using the dry slip for joining the duct that is fabricated at 3-inch water gauge, then we can use the dry slip up to maximum length of 36 inch. If we are using the dry slip for joining the duct that is fabricated for 4-inch water gauge external static pressure, then we can use the dry slip length up to only 30 inch. If our duct is fabricated for external static pressure more than 4-inch water gauge, then the dry slip is not applicable. S slip we have two types, one plain S slip and another standing S slip. If we are using plain S slip, then we need to follow these rules. Number 1, the S slip should be fabricated from a sheet having gauge no less than 2 gauge than the duct. If we fabricate our duct with 22 gauge, then S slip must be fabricated minimum with 24 gauge. Number 2, minimum 24 gauge. We cannot fabricate this S slip with a gauge lesser than 24 gauge. Number 3, 2-inch water gauge is the maximum pressure. We cannot use this S slip with a duct that is fabricated for more than 2-inch water gauge pressure. When used on all 4 sides, fasten within 2 inch of the corner and 8-12 inch maximum interval. If we are using slip and dry method for joining the duct and we are using standing edge slip T-11, then these rules we need to follow. Number 1, fasten the standing portion within 2 inch of each end, elsewhere at 8 inch spacing or less. Number 2, gauge no less than 2 gauges than duct gauge. If we have fabricated our duct of 20 gauge, then the edge slip must not be fabricated less than 22 gauge. Number 2, minimum gauge 24 gauge. The sheet from which we are fabricating the standing edge slip, its gauge must be minimum 24 gauge. Number 4, if we are fabricating our duct at 2 inch water gauge external static pressure, then we can use the standing edge slip at any length. If we are using standing edge slip for joining a duct which is fabricated for external static pressure at 3 inch water gauge, then we can use the standing slip up to maximum length of 36 inch. If we are using standing edge slip for joining the duct which is fabricated for external static pressure 4 inch water gauge, then we can use the standing edge slip up to 30 inch maximum length. For the duct that is fabricated for external static pressure more than 4 inch water gauge, standing edge slip is not applicable. And the number 2 is slip on flange method. Nowadays it is the most commonly used duct joint method for the large project where we are fabricating the HVAC duct inside factories. This picture is showing a piece for the slip on flange, and in this picture you can see the corner piece. Fixing the corner pieces in corner, we make a frame using the slip on flange that is fixed at the end of the duct to make the slip on flange type joint. You can see in this picture we have joined two ducts with the help of slip on flange. At corner you can see we have used the nut and bolt, and in between we use the G-clamp to make the joint airtight. This picture also showing a duct joint using the slip on flange method. At corner you can see we are using nut and bolt, but in between we use TDC clit instead of G-clamp to make the joint airtight. So we can use the G-clamp or we can use the TDC clit in between the nut and bolt. We will study this topic in detail in our next video, duct joint part B. The number 3 is companion steel flange type. It is used for large duct sizes with high pressure application where we are using thicker sheet for the duct fabrication. In this picture you can see a frame is fabricated from steel angle to be fixed at the end of the duct to make the joint. You can see small hole. These hole are this frame to be fixed with the duct with the help of screw. And you can see these larger holes. These holes are used for the nut and bolt to make the joint with other duct. In this picture you can see one steel frame is fixed at the end of one duct and another steel frame is fixed at the end of another duct with the help of rivet or screw. We join these two ducts with the help of this steel flange and we fix the nut and bolt connection at the bigger holes which you see earlier in the frame, and we apply the gasket between two flanges. Now we will study the selection of duct joint type. For the selection of duct joint type, we will use the same SMACNA table that we are using for the selection of duct sheet gauge for the fabrication of duct. Let us assume we have a duct of size 18 by 12 inch and we have the single duct piece length of 4 feet. So we will select the largest dimension from the duct size. This is 18 inch. Now we will go to the first column, that is for duct dimension, and we will select the row for the 18 inch here. Then we will go to the second column and we will see the gauge. In our case it is written 20 gauge. Then we will see our duct. If our duct is fabricated for the same gauge which is in the column number 2, then we can use NEC, slip and dry. But if our duct is fabricated with lesser gauge, then we need to find the gauge in these columns. Suppose we have fabricated our duct with 26 gauge, then we need to find the length of our single piece of duct, and in our case it is 4 feet, so we will select the column from reinforcement spacing for 4 feet. Then we will see at the intersection of reinforcement column and largest duct dimension cell, the number will give us the sheet gauge and the alphabet attached to it will give us the type of our duct joint. In this case we have the duct joint type C. To find the specification according to this alphabet, we have another table from SMACNA from where we can find the specification for these alphabet type B, C, D, E. Now we will go to these tables. For the dry slip, there is one note written in the SMACNA. The dry slip is accepted as being A, B, C rated up to 20-inch length. If we have our duct dimension of 20 inch and we need to select a duct joint of type A, B, C, so we can use dry slip. We have different tables in SMACNA. You can see this table 1-11 for the selection of joint type. You can see in the first column they mention A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You need to select from the previous table the type of the joint. Then from here you have your choice which type of joint you need to select. You can select. Suppose we have our joint type B, so we will select this row, and let us assume we need to select the T11 standing S. So we will select this column also, and at the intersection of this row and this column we will have the specification of our duct joint type. We need to use the sheet thickness to fabricate this standing as 22 gauge if we need to make this height ½ inch, and we can fabricate it from 26 gauge if we are using this height equal to 1 inch. You can see this table is applicable only for D or E type. If we have joint type after this, then we have another table, and this table is applicable for high pressure or bigger size of duct where we are using thicker sheet for the duct fabrication. There are only two types of joint that are commonly used, this companion angle flange type and slip-on flange type. For the slip-on flange type, you can see we need to consult the manufacturer's rating, and we will discuss this in next video separately with detail. Here we will keep our study only up to companion angle flange. Assuming we have from the table we found that we need to select the joint of I type. Then we will select the row for I type of duct joint, and you can see from the column for the companion angle flange we need to select the angle of size 1½ inch and with a thickness of 1/4 inch.